Hi, welcome. I'm Fox Spears. I'm the program manager of fellowships with First Peoples Fund, and I'm here today to talk about the Artist in Business Leadership and Cultural Capital fellowships that we offer, specifically the ones for 2025 that we have our applications open for. Just to let you know what we'll be talking about for an overview, we'll talk about the Artist in Business Leadership Fellowship, a little information about it, as well as the selection criteria. And then we'll talk about the Cultural Capital Fellowship, again, information about that and selection criteria. And then because both of these applications are fairly similar, we'll talk about both of them as it relates to the eligibility, what the timeline is for these, the selection process, and then how to apply. I'll kind of walk through the application a little to give you an idea. And then, of course, my information. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to help anyone who has a question or is having a challenge with something. So to start, the Artist in Business Leadership Fellowship, the purpose of this is really to develop independent, satisfied, and credible entrepreneurial artists who are generous in spirit. This is a self-directed fellowship. It provides professional development guidance. There are networking opportunities, including the fellowship convening, which is something that our fellows all hopefully will attend. There's a few folks sometimes who aren't able to, but yeah, so that's part of it. And then there's the $10,000 grant of working capital funds. So ABL applicants will propose a one-year project that will strengthen their arts business, help further the economic self-sufficiency of their family, and establish themselves as independent and credible artists. So if you're thinking about the Artist in Business Leadership, I want to make sure we're sharing the selection criteria as well. So I think that'll help you understand what the review panel is going to be looking at, how they'll be scoring you, and you can kind of tailor your answers a little more towards that. So again, you'd be developing a project that you would be doing over your fellowship year. So project goals are one of the 4 categories. So they want to make sure, are your goals clearly defined? Are these achievable during the fellowship timeline, which would be 1 year? So that timeline would be from, if you're selected, that would be from January 1st, 2025 through December 31st, 2025. Do you have a plan to accomplish your goals? And then, of course, your budget. Does your budget seem realistic? Um, I will say with the budget, and this is for both of them, don't feel like, if you aren't as familiar with putting things together, you have to have everything completely, outlined. Again, I understand that you'll be putting your application together this summer. If you are selected, there's going to be some time between when you've done this application and when the fellowship starts. So there would be some time to, or there's room to be able to work together if there are things that need to be adjusted with your budget. But, we're wanting to make sure, does your budget reflect that you understand what you need to do, what the costs might be? Does it have enough information that the review panel feels confident in what you're doing and that you understand what you need to do and would be able to accomplish that? The second category is sharing. So this is looking at the proposed project. How is this going to strengthen your art business, your creative practice? How will this further your family's economic independence and or strengthen your community? The third category for scoring that they'd be looking at is lived experience. So this would be, are you a native artist? Do you demonstrate a commitment to your practice? This is where your resume is going to be looked at and probably would fall into more that details the history of your work. I would say also the biography section or question that we ask, that's probably also something that they'd be looking at for this. The last one is knowing. So do your work samples demonstrate a desire to develop as a culture bearer and artistic entrepreneur? Will your proposed project help grow your business and your knowledge base? So, again, this is really, what have you done? What are you wanting to do? Does this seem in line with with something? And well, I'd say with something with the business focus that this particular fellowship has. And I'll say, I will talk about this here too as well. If you're thinking about a project, I believe it does talk about it a little in the guidelines. we've definitely had folks apply, and it doesn't mean that you can't have a creative project as part of what you're trying to do if you're applying for the artist in business leadership. Um, but the purpose of this is less around providing funding for a creative project than to help you grow your business. Um, so think about, you know, think about why what you're doing is important to your business. And are you answering that clearly where the review panel can understand that? You know, you may be able to say, oh, I'm working on this project to finish, say I'm wanting to, you know, make a series of paintings, and that's my project and it's around this. And but completing this and having it done will help boost me and lift me up in my work, in my business and my practice. I think the question would be, well, how exactly? You know, do you have a do you have an opportunity where these will be shown, and you know that you're going to be able to have a place where it's seen, there's a certain reach towards it, or is it really just, well, if I finish this work, then that alone will boost me? And that may be true, but it's probably not as clear or as focused and detailed as what we would ideally be looking for. And the review panel may score you accordingly. So I think if you're doing things, um, you know, business related things, it could be something that is looking looking to grow your professional skills in some manner. You may need to consult with a professional on something specific. So maybe a legal professional, maybe a marketing professional. You might need equipment for your business. You might need supplies and materials. You might need to work with someone to set up a certain financial or business structure. I'd say, there's a lot of things that could fall under this, but again, just wanting to make sure that the focus is really on developing and growing your business, your creative practice, sort of that professional business type of thing, rather than being able to complete a creative project in and of itself and having that be the main goal. So just something to keep in mind. Um, Cultural capital, there's a little more, I'd say this one has a little more freedom in terms of that creativity, and it's not business focused. So this fellowship is designed for folks who are deeply rooted in their communities and committed to passing on ancestral knowledge and cultural practices. Fellows in this program, again, also get $10,000 in grant funding. That's to support their cultural work in their community through the arts. These applicants would be proposing a one-year project that's going to be grounded in cultural preservation and community outreach in some manner. I guess since I talked a little bit about ABL, on this side, I'd say, a lot of times the types of projects we see proposed are, maybe a series of workshops in someone's community, or, things that involve the community that, pass on cultural information. But it could be, that can take a lot of forms. We've got a fellow this year working on something that is, I want to say, like traditional place names, and building, both collecting that knowledge from elders and other folks who have that, and then being able to document that to be shared within the community for the future. There's also someone who was working on a regalia closet. So again, it's a community focused thing where they're wanting to have regalia available for community members who may not have their own, or may not have access to be able to borrow some, but they're still able to participate in ceremonies and community events. So those are kind of ideas. Again, feel free to be creative. If you have an idea around something, great. It doesn't need to be anything I've talked about. It can be something completely different, but it just needs to have that focus where it's around cultural preservation and passing things along within the community, sharing with the community. And intergenerational reach is, certainly wonderful. It doesn't have to be intergenerational, but that's a great thing. But I'd say, think about, well, how is this going to affect the community in the future too? So the criteria for this, again, still has four things that they're looking at in particular. So we've got project goals. So we want to make sure the goals are clearly defined. Are these achievable during the fellowship timeline of that fellowship year? Is your budget realistic? And then is it clear how the project is going to affect the community? And again, for the next generation, it doesn't necessarily mean you're having to say work with children in particular or anything like that, but is this going to have an impact that would last and go into the next generation? How is sharing this information that you're sharing or capturing and documenting, how will that be received? What kind of effect would that have? Sharing itself is obviously its own category next. So, is it clear how you're going to share the knowledge, how you plan to, your knowledge and your expertise with others and with your community? And then also, does the project promote positive change in your community and beyond? Um, the next two, so we've got honoring and knowing. So, the applicant is a native artist who demonstrates a clear commitment to their practice and whose work samples show success weaving cultural knowledge and ancestral gifts into their community. What are you doing? What are you making? What are your work examples like? Do these help kind of complement your application and make sure that people understand that, oh, you've got the knowledge, you're able to do this. It looks like you maybe have done things with your community in the past. Also, are you showing the skills and knowledge that strengthen and sustain cultural and artistic integrity? So, you're doing work where you have this cultural knowledge. Let's see, the last thing, recognizing and embracing the full value of art and culture and its many roles in a community. Collective spirit is the fourth and final category here. So this is asking, does the artist have a clear connection to and is active and or lives within their tribal community? So again, this is a cultural capital thing. So I would say that having that strong connection with your community is going to be important. I think a lot of the wording on these probably does make it sound as if it's required for folks that live specifically within their tribal community. If you maybe live in an urban area, but you're still deeply enmeshed in, maybe not a specific tribal community, but within a broader Native community, I would say you potentially could still apply for this. I think you might need to be, it may need to be a little more clear how the work you're doing affects that broader community. But I would say I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. And if you have a question like that, I'd say feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk with you about that more to see if it might be a good fit or not for you to apply. Let's see. So there's evidence of honoring our connection to one another, the lands around us, and those who came before us. That's also part of the collective spirit. And then also the applicant describing a commitment to building the strength of Native communities by sharing their skills and talents with others. Really, like, again, all of these, there's just such an emphasis for the review panel to see, how are you sharing information that you know? Also, what do you know? Are you motivated to share it? What is your community connection? All of these things. So that's cultural capital. And then the eligibility for both of these is the same. So you must be at least 18 years of age. You need to be an enrolled member of or provide proof of lineal descendancy from a US federally or US state recognized tribe, or be able to provide proof of ancestry as an Alaska Native or Native Hawaiian. I have had a couple folks reach out and ask me if you have a question around the this tribal enrollment type of requirement, feel free to reach out. If you maybe don't have this type of documentation or you're not sure if what you have is appropriate, feel free to ask me. I'm happy to talk further if someone has a question on that. Also, Native practitioners of all creative mediums are welcome to apply. So this includes painting, drawing, printmaking, music, dance, theater, clothing design, basket weaving, beading, storytelling, writing, culinary arts, and much more in both contemporary and traditional forms. So again, I just want to make sure, if you're a performing artist, you are eligible. We've got culinary arts in here. We've had people that do that have been fellows in the past. We've had folks that do, okay, I will give this example. So they do tattooing, but they do traditional tattooing. I will say that, if there's something that feels a little on the line, it would be more of, is this something that still is like culturally related, and in that case, yes, it's likely going to be okay. But if you have a question about something, again, reach out and ask me. I'm happy to offer you, some feedback on that and see if it might be something that does feel like it falls within, or if it's a little questionable and you could still certainly apply, but it may not be the best fit. Happy to weigh in on that for you. Also, continuing on with eligibility, proposed projects may not be affiliated with or sponsored by universities or colleges. They also may not include work completed for academic credit or as part of an academically supported project, program, or residency. And then artists and culture bearers may not apply to the same program in succession. So for example, if you were a 2024 ABL Fellow, you're not eligible to reapply for the 2025 ABL Fellowship. For the moment, at least, we do allow people to have more than one fellowship. So I'd say, we have a few folks in the past who have received the same fellowship more than once, or who have done both the ABL and CC fellowship. If this changes in the future, that would be reflected in our eligibility. But for the moment, know that if you have received a fellowship in the past, unless you're applying for the same one you just received, you can still apply again. Also, if you have been a previous grantee with First Peoples Fund, you must have submitted a final report, or whatever the final documentation is required for any of your previously awarded First Peoples Fund grants. So that's it for eligibility. Talking about the timeline, so the application window, and I realized I was modifying this, so it says nominator application, and that's not correct at all. So it should just be the application. The application opened on Monday, June 17th, and then the applications are planned to close on Monday, July 22nd. I will be looking at how many applications we've received probably a week ahead of that due date. If for some reason it feels like we, maybe a little lower, it's possible we might extend that due date out a little, but for the moment, right now to start, our due date for applications is Monday, July 22nd at midnight Mountain Time. We would be planning to notify all of our applicants in December of 2024 of the status if you've been awarded, selected to receive a fellowship, or if unfortunately it's been declined. And then I think we'd likely be doing our public announcement of our honorees in January of 2025. Again, just so you're aware, the award year for this for these fellowships would be January 1st, 2025 through December 31st, 2025. Really, the number of fellows that we will be accepting in does kind of vary depending on our available funding. I don't have the final count of how many yet, but as an example, this year in 2024, we have 28 fellows total. We have 16 ABL fellows and 12 CC fellows. So I'm assuming it will likely be a number around that, but more info to come, or we'll kind of see what happens there. Again, I did mention there's a fellowship convening. We don't have a date set for this. This usually happens in the spring. So I would anticipate, again, this convening would happen in the spring. I think it's happened as early as March. This year we did it at the beginning of May, which I think is a little later than when it's normally happened, but probably somewhere between March and May is what to expect. Normally, this also, is maybe 2 days, 3 nights type of a thing. We did it this year, holding it Friday through Sunday. So we had Friday and Sunday as our travel days. I'm sorry, I take that back. Thursday through Sunday. So Thursday and Sunday were our travel days, and Friday and Saturday were the main days where we were doing activities. All right, so the selection process, what to expect. So these aren't, we do have 2 separate review panels. So we'll have a review panel for the artists and business leadership, and then we'll have a review panel for cultural capital. So these are 2 separate review panels that would be looking at these, but we'll have a national review panel to read and score all of the applications in 2 stages to make the recommendations. They would be going through doing their initial reviews, and then we'll also be getting together and having a meeting where they're we're looking at the scoring. They have the opportunity to go back and discuss people that they want to. We might be looking at, some of the, folks within a certain rank more in depth, but that's kind of the process that we would do. The panelists will be scoring their applications or all of these applications based on the criteria for each fellowship. So we did talk about that previously. That's what they would be using. And I have an example of, this is the cultural capital scoring rubric below, but again, it has those four categories I was talking about: the project goals, sharing, honoring and knowing, and collective spirit. So they would be assigning each application a score for each of these four sections. And we would be assigning a score between 1 and 5. So 1 is beginning, 2 is emerging, 3 is developing, 4 is effective, 5 is strong. So that's what we mean by scoring. So for example, if you were to score as highly as possible in all four of these categories, if you got 5s in all of them, the score would be 20. So we go through, score them, and then everything is kind of ranked that way. And then we're also going back and discussing as we need it in case people need to make adjustments to their scoring. But I want folks to have some insight into what the selection process is and the scoring. I think that'll help you make your application, you know, you have the information to be able to answer questions more targeted to what the review panels are looking for. I think, I want you to be successful. And I'm sure you do too. So how do you apply? Well, of course, our application links are available on the First Peoples Fund website on the fellowships page. We do use Submittable, so the link will take you right there, but you do need to have a Submittable account registered in order to be able to complete and submit the application. I do want to mention as a best practice, and this is, for ours, but certainly anything you're applying for, it's always best to make sure you're reading through the entire application before you start to fill it out. I think this helps you to understand what all the questions are, what's needed, and so you kind of know what to anticipate. For example, if you don't do this, you might answer a question and then realize a few questions later, oh, there's something that relates to what I said in this earlier one. I think it just helps you to plan out a little more what you might want to say and where. I also think, and I'll just emphasize this, make sure to, read all the questions, read all the instructions. It doesn't always reflect well if things aren't answered correctly, or if things are incomplete. And I think just being careful and making sure, did I read everything? Did I follow the instructions? That's just always going to be helpful and will help you ensure that your application is in the best shape possible. I do have a note at the bottom as well. If someone has any issues or challenges with completing applications online via Submittable, so if there's a challenge, maybe you live somewhere very rural and don't have great access to the internet or to be able to get online to fill this out, something like that, please feel free to reach out to me. If we need to find a way to make an accommodation, I'm happy to try and do what I can for that. I want to make sure that these fellowships and the applications are accessible for folks. So if you have a challenge of some sort, let me know. And if we can find a solution, I'm happy to do that for you. Let's see. So last, I wanted to kind of talk about the application itself, just so you have a sense of what to expect. So, we do ask for some artist info, and this is really more general information. So we're, going to ask for your name, contact information, address, date of birth, gender, tribal affiliation. I would say it's best if you put your legal name on this application. You may go by something different with your practice, but I think, and if you need to indicate that, I think you could indicate it in a biography, or or if it's clear that you're using a different name on say your resume or things like that, that's fine. But if we have your legal name for the application, I think that's easiest. If you're selected, then we know that ahead of time. We would have that ready. It can just make things a little easier, I think, if you're selected and dealing with the paperwork. Also, I'd say, let's see, we ask for your website or social media. That's not required, but I also wanted to point this out because this would not be part of the application review. Not everyone has a website or social media presence related to their art. So we do like to have that information and know that, but I just want to make sure that you understand that since this isn't something that everyone has, that's not something that the review panel is going to be asked to look at. We do ask what your art medium is. There is a long list of things, and ideally what we'd be having you select is your up to 3 of your primary mediums. You may work amongst many more mediums than 3. A lot of folks do, but I would select the 3 that are the most relevant to your application. I think that's going to make things easiest for us to understand, and the review panel to understand, rather than if we see this long list and it's like, ooh, what exactly do they do? There is a section where you can talk about your art medium. So feel free to talk about more than those 3 if you need to there. But when you're selecting those, please, if you can, limit it to up to 3. Let's see, we also ask your employment status, your highest level of education, and how you heard about First People's Fund. Those are kind of just some general questions that we have for kind of our own purpose to know, who's applying and that type of a thing. We do ask for 2 reference letters as well. I also have these included on the last slide of things to upload. And I should say also tribal affiliation, we do ask for proof, but I'll talk about those a little more in the section to upload. So we do then have some questions, I guess, that are maybe more about you and your work as an artist. So we ask for a brief biography of yourself and your work. If you're filling this out, I would say ideally, not that we would just publish it as is, but if you're selected, information within that or that could form the basis of the biography that we would publish. So it can be helpful to think about it that way, like what are you comfortable sharing publicly as well. We do ask, what motivates or inspires you in your art practice. Also, what has been your most rewarding experience in creating, sharing, and/or selling your art? What has been the greatest challenge in establishing your art career? And we do ask what the date you started selling your art is. It's fine if you don't know an exact date. I think really the year is probably the most important thing. So if I believe it asks for there's a calendar thing and it asks for the date that way. So just, the year is probably most important, but if you know the exact date or have something close, that's fine too. We do also ask, have you completed a marketing or business plan for your art business? We do ask this for both of the fellowships. And I think it's, again, we just like to understand where folks are at in their career. Certainly it's not a requirement. And then there's also a question asking about your level of arts business development. That one we do provide a prompt, and there's some information, and we would have you select one, but there's more information on that for you to be able to select. And then questions about the project. So I'd say there's a question where we're asking you to describe your proposed project in 2 sentences or less, and then share how the fellowship will help you develop as an artist/culture bearer who strengthens community and perpetuates generosity, wisdom, and integrity, as well as develop into an independent, satisfied, and credible art entrepreneur. I'm realizing this is where they're very similar. The ABL versus CC applications, that question may be slightly different between the two, but it's going to be pretty close. But I'd say, again, this is where, what is your project? And I'd say be as brief as possible. If you're able to do it in 1 sentence, great. You don't need to use 2 sentences. It's just really like a quick description of what is your project? You will have the ability to expand on that further on. And then again, it's just kind of talking about, what is this fellowship going to do for you? What do you hope it will do for you? How will it help you develop? And certainly along these things, again, community is always something we're interested in. Generosity, wisdom, and integrity. How does this help you do your best in the world? There's another question that I didn't have here that is on the ABL one that I want to say is related to community challenges. So I think there is one more question for those folks. I don't think it'll be anything too complicated either, but it's just kind of talking about challenges that you may have faced in your community and how you might deal with those. It could, you could talk about COVID. There's a variety of things you could talk about there if you needed to. Then we do ask for your project goals, up to 3. I think at least 2 are required, but there's space for up to 3, and their activities and resources. So that's a section where you can type in just briefly what a project goal is, and then there's another section where you can expand on that and talk about what that may be, what the resources are that you would use to accomplish that, any plans you have around that, or how you imagine that could happen. This is where I know there's some information in the applications themselves that give examples. I think the project goals and your general project, there's kind of some leeway in terms of um, what that could be. Feel free to look at the application and look at what it says in that section with examples. Um, and do what feels right for you. I think there's a variety of things you could do that, like, that could be its own project overall with separate goals, or maybe that could be a goal under a larger project. Just think about what you're doing, and whether it does make sense, and the scale of what you want to do. Do things seem achievable? If it feels like maybe you're dreaming too big, it's okay to edit things down and be like, oh, okay, well, maybe I don't need to. So say you're thinking about, with ABL, say you're thinking about focusing on, like, I want to grow my business, so um, I want to improve my marketing. I want to, as a goal, I want to get some new equipment as a goal, and I want to, oh gosh, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a third thing off the top of my head really quick. And there's a third thing as well. Maybe you want to consult a legal professional as well. Um, you know, is it realistic? Do you have enough money in the budget to do everything you want to do? You could certainly look at that. If you wanted to just focus on marketing, well, you could easily come up with 3 goals there. You could narrow it down into having a goal of improving or creating a website, focusing on social media and making sure that's better. And that could be something where you're working with a professional of some sort, or taking a class on something. And then, gosh, what else is my, this is where you can think about, are things realistic, and what is the scale of what you're doing? So um, let's see, back to the questions. So the impact then that the project will have on your business development and or your community. um, this is this is, this one I think also is worded a little differently. I think in AB, this is worded for ABL. So we do ask about the impact the project would have on your business development and or your community. I think this question for CC is asking more just on your community. This and then the next question, I feel like it's easy to read them very similarly, but this I would say, what is the, you know, how is your project going to change things for your community or for your business? Um, the last question here, please describe specific examples of how you currently share or intend to share your knowledge and expertise with others in your community. It also has this community aspect to it, but this is, and it could relate to the impact of what it would have, but how are you going to share things? So there can be some overlap between these last 2 questions, and I think it might be good to think about them a little bit ahead of time to make sure you're not just repeating the same thing over. Impact and then how you're sharing are related, but they are different. Um, let's see. Okay, and then of course the application, what do you need to have to upload that you're not able to just type your answer directly in? So you'll need to have your documentation that shows your proof of tribal affiliation or lineal descendancy. That's something that's uploaded in. You'll need to have 2 reference letters. So these would be professional or community references generally. There's a section where you're able to enter in the person's name, their email address. I think their name and their email address are required. You can enter their phone number if you have it, and then you can upload the letter. We ask for your project budget. So again, it's okay if you're not entirely certain or set on your budget, but we want to make sure, do you have a handle on, say, the categories of things that you'll need to do, and need to have in order to accomplish this? Does your budget seem realistic? Does it seem like you've thought through what you need to be able to do this? I would also say, um, I didn't talk about the disbursement schedule, but we do, if you're selected, you get $9,000 up front, and then the final $1,000 is held back until December after you complete your closing measures. Um, Keep that in mind. That's also something where you would have to, you won't have the full amount up front. So I think if you wanted to do a budget focused on $9,000 and you have a contingency of $1,000, from that money that would be coming at the end of the year, that's fine to do. You certainly don't have to allocate for every single penny. I think it's good to be realistic. I think it's good to think about what what might come up, anticipate challenges. Um, if you have everything spent right to the wire, it'll make it more challenging if something does happen and you're like, ooh, now what do I do? Also, I think with project budgets, sometimes people don't realize, but if you need to include some money to, pay for time, whether that's someone else's time, if you're working with someone or hiring someone for something, or if you just need to put some money towards your own time to be able to devote time to your project in some manner, that's okay too. You know, you're an artist, your time is valuable. You know, plan accordingly if you need to, by all means. We do ask for an artist statement. Um, this is probably pretty familiar for visual artists. I'm less familiar, and I'm a visual artist, and that's kind of more my background. So I'm less familiar with that if you're a performing artist, but it sounded like I was talking to our program manager of performing arts, and she said that is still relevant, likely for her and what she does. So if you have questions about that, feel free to reach out. But really, it's just talking about what you do, and it's kind of general a general statement. If you needed to Google that and look online or something like that, there's lots of examples of what an artist statement is. We do ask for a resume. I would say ideally this is a resume tailored to whatever your art business and or art practice is. That may not be as relevant for cultural capital. If not, I'd say that's probably not as important there, but definitely for artists and business leadership, the resume is something that they kind of look at more closely in terms of some of the scoring or one of those scoring questions. We do ask for artwork samples, I believe up to 10. Those can be images or files depending on what you're needing to do. There's definitely guidelines and information in the application that talks more about what these can be and the formats, all of that. I think if you're doing images, if you're a visual artist or not, but images are pretty easy. If you have a file, I will mention that. So, for instance, if you're a writer and you're uploading examples, we would ask. I forget exactly what the limit is. I want to say 2 pages. So either like a 2-page sample, or if it's a larger sample, then we would ask you to tell us, what should the review panel look at within a certain limit. I think it's maybe 1 to 2 pages. Or if it's a video or an audio file, again, I believe if it's up to 2 minutes, or to if it's a longer file, to delineate what timestamp they should be looking at. If that's not mentioned, then the reviewers will just be looking from the very beginning for either like the 2 pages or the 2 minutes, whatever that limit is, just from the very start of it. So if there's something you want them to look at specifically, make sure you note that. And that's where the description of artwork samples, that's where you can do that. So there's again information in the application that talks about that. Last would be an artist photo. So ideally, a headshot of you. It could be something, if you're working, if it's an example of you working in your medium, that could also be a great idea. If you're selected, this image may be used publicly, so just be aware of that as well. I believe that is everything. Yes, that is everything I wanted to go over and talk about. My contact information is here. Again, my name is Fox Spears. I'm the program manager of fellowships. My email address is fox@firstpeoplesfund.org. And then my work phone number is 407-212-7313. Feel free to reach out if you have a question about anything. And I wish everyone the best of luck in applying this year. I can't wait to see all the applications and see who we have applying and who is selected. Thank you so much.